Moran. Katy is an entrepreneur. She is also the national account manager for Solomon, one of the premium positions dealing with an account that's larger than some countries, REI. So she's in charge of selling in Solomon to REI on a national level. So heads up to Seattle often to deal with REI. And so Katy is here. She's going to be speaking to us today with her entrepreneurial hat on. So please welcome Katy Moran.
Thanks, Tim. So, looking at this picture, in fact, let's take, instead of 6 of these milk cartons, let's take these 2. And I would argue that as you're looking at these 2 brands, you feel nothing. I would argue maybe thirsty, but you feel nothing. These are commodities. They've not done any sort of branding. They're just there. You pick it up when you go to the store. If you need milk, you just grab whatever brand happens to be there. So I'd argue that when you see these brands that actually have worked hard to become brands and not just products, that you do feel something, that you have an emotion attached to these. And what is interesting about these for me is these aren't necessarily all, you look at Harley, you look at Apple, and yeah, I mean, these brands are hot, high ticket items. So you could argue that, of course, they're not milk. But McDonald's, they make burgers and fries. But you probably have a different feeling when you see Apple than you do Microsoft. You have a different feeling when you see McDonald's, Burger King, or Harley and Vesta. I don't know motorcycles very well. But these have come a long way in becoming brands and becoming where you feel an emotional connection to them. And that isn't on accident. They've made it their brand to become a brand. But it's not always just knowing who you are and all the great traits that you can bring. Sometimes it's knowing the perceived bad traits. And it's just about being authentic. So you know what you're good at, you know what you're bad at, and you know what you stand for. So as Tim mentioned, I come from Park City, Utah. So big ski town. One of the next canyon over is Snowbird. And they were looking to rebrand themselves, and they kept getting these terrible reviews. They had a ton of 1-star reviews. And rather than shying away from those 1-star reviews, they leaned in. So, too advanced. Disappointed, this just talks about how there's not one easy run on the mountain. No easy runs. And this was their campaign that they went out with. Won a ton of awards with it. And they're basically saying, okay, beginners, this might not be for you. But in doing so, all the advanced skiers want to go there. So taking what they knew, who they were, and leaned in. I love what Cheetos did during the Super Bowl with this too. Let's see if this works. Oh.
Let's see if it's going to play.
Anyway, fine.
Oh, shoot.
That's all right. If you guys haven't seen this, it's hilarious. And so basically the Cheetos dust that we all know about, the reason not to buy Cheetos, leaned in, partnered with MC Hammer about you can't touch this, and he just used his hand with the Cheeto dust as a reason to get out of anything he didn't want to do. But it's not just brands that our companies are not just brands, right? People become brands. So you look at Ellen, and she's made a brand out of being kind to animals, about being kind of a people's person, a people's celebrity. George Clooney, handsome, great actor, handsome, activist, handsome, smart, handsome. But then you look at Gronk, right? This guy leans into the fact that he's a meathead. Like, he loves it. He just had like this party with Gronk party, and you go to the beach and spend $1,000 so you can have a beer with Gronk. I mean, he owns that. Another guy who takes a flaw and owns it, right? It's Keith Richards. Like, I mean, this guy is all about drugs and alcohol and celebrates it. So when you see a picture of Keith Richards and he's got whiskey and beer and he makes quotes like this, you're like, yeah, that's about right. It's Keith Richards. But what if that, instead of Keith Richards, that was Tom Hanks? You'd be like, what is going on? I mean, here's Tom Hanks drinking a juice box, for crying out loud. We have no problem with that. If Tom Hanks is featured like that, though, it's incongruous. We can't really wrap our minds around it. These are personal brands. And today, what I want to get across to you is we're all brands. All of us are a brand, whether we like it or not. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is your brand is day. And if you're not the one creating it, someone else is. So we've got to get in the driver's seat and own that personal brand. So what is personal branding? Personal branding, and I love this quote from Jeff Bezos. It's what people say when you're not in the room. So it's what are you making people feel, and it's how you create that, how you communicate that, and how you make people feel. So when you leave that room, what are people saying? And that is your personal brand. So why is it important? Personal branding does a lot of things. So it builds trust. Anytime that you can take down those barriers of uncertainty with people, they're going to trust you more. So if I come into a room and people already know my background, people know something about me, they know I'm trustworthy, I don't have to make any time or effort, or as much time and effort, in establishing those connections, because they already know me, because they know my brand. It enhances credibility. I think this one goes without saying, but basically if I can go, so you looked on LinkedIn, actually I'll use my friend Amy as an example. Amy talks about running all the time. Amy's a PE teacher. Amy runs endurance races. She does 50Ks pretty much, I think, once a month. So and she's posting about it all the time. So when I have a question about running, I go to Amy. That's her brand. She's a runner. She makes it, and she's established herself as the expert. Creates connections. Going back to Amy, she's made so many friends that she's never met. And it's all about that running community. And again, that's part of her brand. Opens up opportunities. Amy again. She had a job teaching PE at the school, was not making very much money. Another job came up about twice the income. They pursued her. Again, she became this brand. They went after her, knowing that she is all about this. Establishes authenticity and enables differentiation. And this is a big one. Tim mentioned what a crowded space we are with technology and how it's become, everything has changed. And how do you set yourself apart these days? Well, how do you not be a milk carton? How do you become a brand? And that's exactly what personal branding can do, is it sets you up to be different than everyone else in your space doing the same thing. But what I like most about personal branding is what this guy's done. So Richard Branson, 11.3 million Twitter followers. To give you some perspective, like Virgin Atlantic, one of his companies, has about 500,000 Twitter followers. He's bigger than his brands. His brand is bigger than the brands he's created, and that makes him a little impervious to market conditions. If Virgin Atlantic goes under, he's still Richard Branson. If Virgin Media goes under, he's still Richard Branson. So that brand is going to supersede what happens with some of his other brands. And so how can you manage your personal brand? And that's what I really want to talk to you guys about today, is how to do that. Because it all comes down to your story. Tim mentioned that everyone has a story, and it's true, and you guys all have stories too. But it's not just about your story. You've got to create that story and know what you want it to look like. And then you've got to communicate that story out, and then finally you have to connect that. So when I mean connect, it means not just puking out facts about yourself, but how do you connect that story to the other person? How do you make someone care? Who gives a crap? How do you answer that question? So let's talk about create first. First thing you need to do is figure out who you are. And that might seem easy. It seems like we've all lived with each other or with ourselves for a long, long time. But have you ever really thought, like, what makes you you? And so if you haven't, I would challenge you to do one of two things. Either ask yourself a bunch of these questions. So, in what areas do I excel? What motivates you? How do others describe you? I like this one. What projects, roles energize you and what drain you? We all have these things that we can spend hours on without feeling tired. What are those? What am I consistently being asked or asking for help on? So something that maybe you're not naturally good at. And then lastly, what is my superpower? So a friend of mine, his superpower is literally he remembers every number. So if you said your credit card number out loud, he will remember it forever. It's an odd superpower, but he has it. Some people have that with directions, right? They just know how to get places. And they might seem like they don't matter for your personal brand, but think about it, write it down, because it does matter. But what I like to do, and this is something I challenge myself to do guess the beginning of last year, is a personal SWOT. So I'm sure everyone knows what a SWOT is. SWOT analysis is something that businesses do, looking at strengths of the brand, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So strengths and weaknesses, those are what come from inside. Those are internal, right? What you bring to the table. And opportunities and threats, those are external. So some sample questions for all of these would be, so for strengths, when you're thinking about who you are, like what are you good at? We talked about these. What do you do better than anyone else? What do you have certifications in? So really get to know what you bring to the table that perhaps makes you unique. For weaknesses, same thing. One thing I want to call out on this slide though, what do other people say about you, even if it's not true? So you might know in your head, in your heart, that something isn't true, but if people believe it, the court of public opinion will decide, and then it does become true. So know what people are saying about you, so your weaknesses are not only what you actually can and cannot do, but what other people are saying. Opportunities, as you go through every bullet, but again, just looking at what can you do to either better those weaknesses or improve upon your strengths. And then threats. So something from external factor that could really damage your personal brand or what you're trying to do. So really getting to know who you are sets up for that creation of your story, but it's not the only thing. Because while you're all those puzzle pieces, you probably only want to be known for one or two of those things. So figuring out how you're going to set yourself apart. So I actually used to teach tennis out in Beverly Hills, and right after college, I played college tennis at Purdue, and went out there, and I didn't have a ton of experience. I taught in summer times, and then this is my first kind of full-time job. I'm not going to be known as the one with the most experience. I wasn't that great at tennis, so I'm not going to be known as the best player. But I had the best time. So when I would go out and kind of market myself, I was the fun one, right? Like I was the one that you're going to have a blast out there on the court with me. Am I the one who taught this celebrity? No. Am I the one who won a pro tournament? No. But I was the fun one. And I knew I couldn't compete on any other access. So I chose the one I could compete on, and that's what I did. Communicate your story. So you've got something in your head that you want people to know about. How do you communicate that? Well, you've got the online communication and the offline. And again, I want to emphasize this part. Your story's being written online. And I went to a seminar about Instagram, which sounds kind of stupid, but it was awesome. And this is where I learned this, and they said, listen, if you Google yourself, someone's saying stuff about you. And if it's not you, you're not controlling that narrative. So you want, when you Google yourself, for the first probably 4 or 5 things to be something that you created, whether that's your social accounts, whether that's a blog, something. So if I look you guys up, it's the story that you want me to know, not the story that some random person is telling. So there's a lot of people who are like, I don't do social media. I don't do social media. I would encourage everyone to do social media. It is something where you need to be in charge of you, and if you're letting someone else write that, you're not in charge of you. So we're not going to talk about all of these, but I do want to talk about a couple principles that remain true for every single social channel that you're seeing up there. And that's this. So if you're going to do nothing else, these are just the basics. Reserve your username and handle for all social channels, even the ones you're not using. I have a friend, Crash Boom Bang is her social handle. She's got a ton of Instagram followers. Every time she posts, she probably gets like 1,000 likes. If she doesn't reserve Crash Boom Bang on Snapchat and someone else takes it, no one knows that's not the same person. So reserve it on all social channels to make sure, again, you're owning that narrative and it's not getting confused. And use the same name. So my name is Katy Moran, but my given name is Kathleen Carney Moran. So if I'm Katy on some, Kathleen on others, Casey on others, it gets so confusing. Use the exact same name on every single one. And the same profile picture. This isn't as it's not that imperative, but make sure that people can see your face, make sure it's a similar look and feel across all channels, so that people know that they do have the right Crash Boom Bang, they do have the right person. And come up with a catchy tagline or headline. I know that this sounds a little cheesy, but if you remember the Richard Branson one, like a tie-loathing entrepreneur, you guys are all more than teaching pros. You guys are all more than anything, right? So come up with something that you feel like is, if you were to have a tagline for brand you, what is that? And use that across all social channels. So you've got this one quick bit, and a good place to get this from is elevator pitch, which we'll talk about in a second. So with your elevator pitch, grab some of that, put it on your social channels. And decide on a consistent look and feel. So if you're constantly on LinkedIn, what are you commenting on? What are you posting on? What are you liking or acknowledging? And try to keep that consistent. Don't be all over the board so people do know what you stand for. And above all, be authentic. So when I say create your story, this isn't fabricating a story. This is creating within you what you want people to know, and keep that authentic throughout all the channels. I said I wasn't going to go into all the social media, but I do want to go into LinkedIn a little bit, because this is going to be, from a professional side, obviously our most important channel. So how do we maximize LinkedIn? Couple tips. Use professional photos, ideally. And optimize it for search. That's just as easy as saying Katy.Moran. That's how I'm going to name it, so that people can search for it and it'll be seen. Nothing super tricky there, but it really helps with your search. And then that tagline. So basically, if you think about tagline as the window dressing of your profile. So are people going to go into the store? Are they going to read further down? That tagline and the summary are what people are going to start, encourage people or discourage people from scrolling down and seeing the rest of what you have to offer. And that's that summary that I mentioned. So spend some time on this. This is something that a lot of people get no further than the summary. And so we want, if you're going to be on LinkedIn, we want people to go further than the summary. We want people to know who you are. And if that summary is not catchy, if that summary is not compelling, they're going to go no further. And don't just list what you've done. Tell a story about it. Because listing what you've done as a job description, it doesn't tell me anything about you. It just shows me a job description. List what you've done and then how you've impacted it. Show the impact that you made. So tell a story. Tell me what you've done and what you can do for me, whether I'm going to be a client, potential employer, or just someone, who might be curious, but tell me about you. And then add the key skills and get recommendations. I know myself, I don't like asking for recommendations. It feels awkward, it feels clunky. But anytime someone asks me for recommendations, I'm happy to do it. So no one's going to write something unless you ask. So endorsements from other people, but don't be afraid to ask. And this is what I challenge you to do on LinkedIn, even if it's once a week. Link, like, and comment. So link to everyone you know. Reach out, just ask everyone to be in your network. The more people you're linked up with, the more exposure you're going to get, and the more potential connections you'll have through them. That it's much easier for me to get to know Sean if Tim introduces me than if I just go up to Sean alone. So having those connections. And then every time you like something, you're going to show up on people's feeds. And again, it's establishing that brand so that I'm only going to like things about, right now I'm in the outdoor world, so I like a lot of things that, about the environment, I like a lot of things about trail running, I like a lot of things about other brands, to show people that this is what I do, and then comment. So you don't even have to post anything. Just, I couldn't agree more with this story, but it keeps you front of mind, it keeps that brand front of mind. But your being is not just online, it's also offline. So I like this because if your offline persona and your online persona don't match, Tim mentioned it about body language, it's incongruous and you're not going to know what to believe. So you need to have those match. So who you are offline should match who you are online and vice versa. I don't know if this one will work either. Anyway, this Dream Crazier, have you guys seen this one? So it's a Nike ad, it's fabulous. It's narrated by Serena Williams, but basically saying dream crazier, because it's only crazy until you do it. And at the end, it says just do it, it's Nike, and you're like, this makes sense. And at the end, it was like the big golden arches, you'd be like, what? No, that doesn't make sense. Because the online and then the offline didn't match. So even though it would be the exact same content, who's telling that story makes a big difference. So again, making sure your online, your offline match. So how do you tell your offline story? Elevator pitch. So elevator pitch, you should have a couple of them, right? You should have a personal one, you should have one about your business, you should have one personal being for a client facing or just at a party. Have this elevator pitch because again, this is kind of like your summary on LinkedIn. You want people to get to know more. It's funny, did an elevator pitch on an elevator. My friend, I used to work at Nike, and my friend got in the elevator, and Phil Knight got in the elevator with him. And so he did. He had a chance to do his elevator pitch in an elevator, and the guy was walking on, he was on cloud nine forever just because he got to do that. But knowing, to have 30 seconds and being able to tell people about you or your business is critical. Sometimes you don't get more than 30 seconds with someone. So for an elevator pitch, a couple do's and don'ts as you're thinking about it. Start by introducing yourself. It sounds kind of silly, but a lot of times people forget that you do actually have to say your name. And then a quick summary of what you do and what you want. And then finish with a call to action. And it doesn't have to be something cheesy, but we'd love to follow up later, or here's my business card. Anything like that where there is a reason then to re-engage. You want to have that. You want to be able to leave and not have that door shut and practice. And again, you don't want to sound inauthentic, but you want to understand how you sound and what you're trying to get across. And don't ramble on and on. This should be about a 30-second pitch again, elevator. And about 75 words is probably a good measure for that. And don't appear uninterested. You're talking about yourself. So hopefully you can muster up some level of interest. Don't speak too fast, which I'm always guilty of. And don't limit yourself to just one pitch, as I mentioned. And then don't practice. So again, make sure that you're practicing this pitch so that when you do get in an elevator with Phil Knight, you know what to say and you don't have any problem saying. Networking. I hate the word networking, but for this purpose, I'm going to use it. Networking is just getting to know people. I mean, it has this huge stigma attached to it about it sounds smarmy and gross, and it's not. It's just keeping up with old connections. It's making new connections. It's enjoying someone at a party and talking. I mean, networking is not a bad thing. But it is something that you want to be kind of conscious of, right? If you've got connections from the past, keep those connections. Reach out, see how they're doing, and then maybe someday it will be more, I kind of need something from someone, but if you have that connection as a friend or as an acquaintance, before you have to ask for that favor, it makes it so much easier. And lastly, thinking about your personal brand offline, how you do anything is how you do everything. People are watching everything you do. So I mentioned that I played at Purdue, and I mentioned also that I wasn't very good at tennis, and those are both true statements. But why I got recruited to play at Purdue is I was caught practicing soccer drills at 5 a.m. To work on my footwork to get better. And my coach saw that, and so when the Purdue coach called and said, do you know of anyone who might be a good fit, they thought of me. I didn't know anyone saw me. I wasn't doing it for that. But everyone sees everything you're doing. At least assume that everyone does. And then connect their story. So this video won't work either. That's okay. I don't know how much you guys I went to school for marketing, and so they talk about hand loyalty, head loyalty, and heart loyalty. Hand loyalty they're the milk cartons, right? You don't care. It's what you see when you're going through the grocery store checkout line. I just need a pack of gum. I just need chapstick. I just need a gallon of milk. You don't think about it. It's just whatever is closest to you. Head loyalty is specs. I think about this with appliances a lot. I don't care what kind of washer dryer I have. It could be LG. It doesn't matter. I'm going to look at the specs, look at the price, and that's what's going to win me over. And then there's heart loyalty. Heart loyalty is just, you can't describe why. Right? Tide actually has some of the most loyal customers. I'm a Subaru fan. I don't know why. I love Subarus. And that's where you want to grab people. That's going to be the hardest to get, but the hardest to lose as well. Because you're not going to lose on price. You're not going to lose on convenience. You're only going to lose on brand. And that's what you want to get to when you're starting to think about creating that brand and communicating that brand. If you look at Google, the mission statement, organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. Great. It's pretty head boil. I mean, that's makes sense. This doesn't work. But did everyone see the Loretta commercial from Mr. Google? Amazing, right? Again, we encourage you guys to look. This won't work. Basically, it's a true story about this man, this woman. She since passed. He's getting older, and he doesn't want to forget her. And so he has Google help by setting reminders, like remind me that she used to say this, remind me that she loves these kind of flowers. And it's almost impossible not to tear up. But Google took this, head loyal, and suddenly made it heart loyal. Suddenly you want to be part of this brand, and you're not going to forget this brand. And that is a challenge. It's not easy, but again, as you're thinking about your personal brand and communicating it, do more than puke up facts about yourself. Make it where it tugs at the heartstrings. And so I just want to summarize quickly about your story. So you want to create that story first. You have it in you. Just figure out who you are and who you want to be and what you want to be known for. And when you communicate it, if you remember nothing else about today from me, your story's being told, your brand is being created. It's got to be done by you. Otherwise, you're leaving it up to chance. And then connect. Go for the heart. So when you're thinking about that story, connecting that story, think about how you get to someone's heart, and then that's going to make your brand impervious.